I don't have knowledge as much about Generations 3DS, but I assume it worked in a similar way, if not exactly the same. And so such things like enemies were completely disregarded in Generations for scoring purposes, which actually seems pretty lame, because it is. Well, rip that thing. But yeah, my overall point is, this game actually brought back an okay scoring system in 2D games. But if the trend continues, according to the last couple of Sonic games that have been released, there is not a lot of consideration for having a 3D game have a scoring system anymore. And it's kind of a shame too, because, well, Forces actually could have had a potentially okay scoring system. I completely forgot to mention Forces in this whole discussion. But alright. So Forces actually had a decent setup. You got a certain amount for rings. I think it was 300 a ring. And enemies, especially comboing enemies, gave a little bit more. But you didn't really get a lot of combo credit. You just kind of got a slight increase, and then that was your cap. So every enemy you hit after that was basically like that amount. And I think it was like 1,500 or 1,000, something like that. Certainly one of those. So you had all this interesting dynamic. Your time bonus was usually your biggest source of score in the average case. And you also had a new feature where, like Sonic Mania, the amount of times you retried actually came into play. Except it was retries and not just like getting hit in the stage. So technically it was made easier than Mania tried to make it. Unfortunately, it was kind of meaningless because you can always sidestep it and make sure you get the maximum bonus from having 0 retries, which kind of makes the system pretty dumb. Like, a no-hit system in Mania is a lot harder to actually just try and circumvent, because every time you even get hit, you'll have to restart the stage, and most players will probably just get really tired of it after long enough, considering the amount of stages this game has, etc, etc, etc. Alright, so I've said all these good things about the Forces scoring system. Why do I think it's bad? Well, the fact that they decided to make some kind of a weird system where you could multiply your score, because score turns into, like, some version of experience in that game. That's the reason they did it, and I can completely understand that. I just don't think it was necessary at all for a Sonic game. And not only that, it also potentially just sits there and just ruins everything the scoring system was meant to be about. Because you can multiply your score by up to 3. Just by doing the sequence of daily missions. And so yeah, the amount of time you had to do a score, to do any score, was governed by your daily missions. And so that's what makes the Forces scoring system a bit dumb, in my eyes. They had all the right ideas. They were trying to base things off the right games. They were trying to base things off Colors and Generations. 2 games that had good ideas. Sometimes not executed in the best way, but good ideas nonetheless. And Forces managed to combine the 2 games in probably the worst way possible. I don't think you could actually do much worse than they did with Forces in terms of trying to combine the 2 games. Because all you literally needed to do was properly combine a revised form of the Colors scoring system, which they actually tried to do. I'll give them a lot of credit for actually trying to do that. It's just the fact that they added the whole daily bonus system, or daily mission bonus system, to completely ruin it. That just kind of spoiled that part of the game for pretty much anyone. But they also brought back Generations in kind of a poor way, because it feels like Classic Sonic was most definitely shoved in. Not to mention, Classic Sonic also really did not carry the same physics from Generations over. Which is fine in one way, because they were looking to improve on the physics. Their intent was to look to improve upon the physics. But what ultimately happened... And I know I'm going in a circle, I gotta figure out what I'm doing wrong. What ultimately happened is they probably just made it worse and not better in about every way. Okay, that actually does hurt you. I suppose that's not surprising because it's literally an ice spike, but I could say I've never tried to touch the top of the ice pillar before until right now. So I think we all learned something at that particular moment today. But yeah, they decided to bring Classic Sonic back in probably the worst form possible. I mean, I get it. They wanted to bring a drop dash because Sonic Mania. I get it. But I feel like that came at the cost of having Classic Sonic actually be pretty good. Which was kind of unfortunate. I guess we'll just go here instead, why not? Oh yeah, I was meant to show you how rings respawn in this level, but I think it's too late. I'm at that checkpoint again. Wait, no, I think I could do it with Tails, actually. I would have a much better time to do it with Tails than Sonic. Because I don't have to use the ice in this instance. Alright, so I break these two blocks, right? Now I will go into this checkpoint, go into the blue sphere stage. Exit, because it doesn't really matter if you complete it or not. And then you come back here, the enemy is respawned as well. And these boxes are now here again. And you can collect the rings the same way you did before. And that is why ring attack in this particular level is weird as hell. I also set myself up perfectly to gain an extra life. Because I am just that good. The only thing you'll really want to be careful of is when you're trying to jump, make sure you don't accidentally fly as well. Because that does make you kind of vulnerable. But that's a general rule of Tails, and most people already know this. So, it's no surprise. Yeah, it's time for Eggman to use his little thing. Take us to Sonic CD Land all over again, because Eggman still wants a Little Planet. He's still very upset that he never actually got to conquer Little Planet. There must be some interesting reason why Eggman really wants Little Planet. Does he want to just turn it into his Little Planet? Is there another reason for it? Does Little Planet have some secret energy source that Eggman wants? That could have really developed into some real Sonic CD lore, but Sonic CD was very simplistic in its story design because it was just simply made after Sonic 1. That's the only real problem with Sonic CD's like general storyline, is that there is no story, for the most part. That's probably why Tails was safely added into it, because Tails really does have no story in Sonic CD, because he has no purpose in Sonic CD. Sonic, however, it's more like, go to Little Planet, kick Eggman's ass, discover Amy, because I'm pretty sure Sonic has never met Amy before, at that point, and save the girl in distress from the evil, maniacal Metal Sonic. Who you also think you destroyed Stardust Speedway, but then comes back in Sonic 4 Episode 2, and in other places as well. Because Eggman will never give up on creating the perfect Metal Sonic, superior to the real Sonic in every way. That is probably one of Eggman's life goals. He will never give up and never surrender. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba. Wow. That was nasty. So this is now officially the second time Tails is technically in Sonic CD. And Tails probably still has no idea what he's doing. That madman Fox. Now here it is, Stardust Shitway Act 2. I'm literally gonna call it that because this level is just... it's a clusterfuck and not a level. To the highest degree. The only real similar part to the real Stardust Speedway 2, you basically just saw it. It's not even exactly the same, it's just very similar to the real Stardust Speedway 2, and I could die. I got a ring, never mind. And I'm gonna keep making this mistake until the end of time because I just never am prepared to actually react to this part right here, because you just need to go here to progress. And yes, Tails falls like that, just like in Sonic CD for whatever reason. I'm pretty sure some things are borrowed from what they used to make CD11. I think it might even be the same exact engine, if I'm not mistaken. It's just, this is a later version of the same engine, if I'm not mistaken. So it's no surprise that, you know, some things work very similarly to what you may have seen in CD11. I don't even know why I'm trying this, because this is definitely not the way I was really meant to go. This middle road! Thank you. This middle road really does not want me to go through it. Jeez. Wow, that... man. Tails doesn't even know what a Metal Sonic race even is. Tails has no idea what this thing is. Tails shouldn't be facing a Sonic. That would imply Tails is not afraid. But Tails was afraid of everything in Forces. So how does that make any sense? Pro tip, it doesn't. It doesn't. It does not make any sense. Ow! That was rude. The hops! There we go. You gotta remember not to spin dash here, because you'll get a running start, even though the game has no desire to tell you that. I've been fooled before by charging a spin dash and then just going to a complete stop after that flash transition for that very reason. I'm surprised I avoided that. I even jumped up, which probably would have made me more likely to hit it. And then I hit that instead. Beautiful. Metal Sonic has been beaten so many times, he winds up being so slow now. But yeah, the general design of this fight is actually pretty poor. I'm not going to deny that. It's more like the kind of shit you'll actually see in a Sonic fan game, not here. Sonic fan games have this type of crude design. Where like, oh yeah, the rings don't disappear from the behind the spikes. Oh yeah, you know, Metal Sonic can be hit pretty easily, even after his attacks. It's just the fact that a lot of that really just does seem like it's more like the kind of stuff you see in a Sonic fan game rather than in an official game like Sonic Mania. Okay. We really like boats. That was a long way down. Well. Oh well, we're going another way then. Double water power. So if you're wondering why this part, you know, is really slow, you could blame 8-bit for that, because that was a common thing in 8-bit games. I feel like that really didn't belong here. It really doesn't. That just really belonged to stay in 8-bit games instead. In my eyes, so yeah. Just kind of makes the level feel way longer than it needs to be. But then again, I'm not claiming that this is the fast path. This is actually probably one of the slowest paths in the entire level. The fast path has probably been governed by one wrong turn. Because I get the feeling that's how this game works. The fast path is usually governed by one correct or wrong turn. kind of makes me feel like this really is S3K in that regard. Because fast pats, say that 5 times fast. Fast pats are usually governed by 1 or 2 decisions in the level. Possibly even 3. I suppose it depends what level we're really talking about, but if you're looking to go fast, there's usually only 1 or 2 ways to do it. I'm surprised I carried a water shield throughout this entire level. Suck him up! Ah! I didn't hit him. That's what happens when you let go too early. Don't hesitate on hitting Eggman. Even if the bombs are pretty close. You just gotta understand where the bombs are likely to hit you. Well, not likely, where they are going to hit you. You actually do have a little bit more of a leeway than you might think. In this instance, it was no good situation, but... You just gotta make sure Eggman generally comes up first before the bombs. But even if they're like neck and neck towards the end, you could still probably hit him in the end anyway. It's not too bad. I suppose we talked about scoring systems earlier. Let's talk about rings. Let's talk about rings now, I guess. Now, S3K is notorious for being very glitchy. It's probably one of the glitchiest games in the entirety of 2D Sonic. Like I said before, I think I said this before anyway, I've repeated this opinion so many times on my stream, it's hard for me to figure out whether I've actually said this thing or on a playthrough or not. Just because I've gone through this same discussion so many times already, it feels very versed to me at this point. Anyway. Sonic 3 Knuckles is probably one of the glitchiest games in the entirety of 2D Sonic. And this even, you know, goes past a lot of 8-bit games. This even goes past Sonic Spinball, I'll argue. Even 8-bit Spinball. 8-bit Spinball is actually very glitchy in and of itself. But it's more like there were probably limitations regarding the game, so that's probably what caused a lot of their problems. Whereas S3K was... it was a work of ambition. It was a work of ambition, so any limitations that happened on the part of S3K were pretty much Sega's fault. Because they did not have to necessarily make a game that big. They just did. So, I say S3K is one of the most glitchy games. It also results in one of arguably the worst games to Ring Attack. The 3D version of a very bad game to Ring Attack. And I say this because it'll just be pure frustration more than anything else. Is Sonic Unleashed for the PS3 and 360. That too is a very difficult game to actually Ring Attack in full. Yes, there are easy ones. I could say the same thing with S3K. But for the most part, those two games in particular are the hardest in the entirety of the Sonic series to Ring Attack. And that's part of the reason why I haven't done either of them yet, for the most part. But, how this ties into Mania, right. So Mania is a Sonic 3 and Knuckles successor, like I mentioned before. Not a real, obviously not a real successor, a spiritual one, like I mentioned right away at the start of my first playthrough. And it does carry with it a lot of the aspects about Sonic 3 Knuckles that may or may not prove interesting, depending on who you speak to. One of the aspects about Sonic 3 Knuckles is that the levels were so complex that you often had to seriously plan out a route and also actually be worried about trying to finish the level within the time limit. And Mania does follow suit in that regard. I say this not having done a ring attack yet, but I've heard things from people, and I believe them for the most part, because if you just look at the levels themselves, without really even considering things like, you know, where to go for a ring attack and that sort of thing, the levels are usually really big. And there aren't very many exceptions to that. The levels are, in fact, pretty big. And big levels mean complicated ring attacks. Especially when you gotta figure out that not every level has the entire stage accessible to you at every point. Some pads close off, and you gotta consider that as well. That's one of the unfortunate things if you're trying to do a ring attack in a 2D Sonic game. I'm only gonna hit once because I'm afraid. I'm gonna actually try and keep my rings if it's possible. Wow! This game also happens to break another common rule of 2D Sonic. Well, it's not really a rule, it was more like a limitation back then, I think. Usually we're able to only get back a maximum of 20 rings when you launch your rings. In this game, it's a bit more than 20. It was at least 22 in this instance. That's another fun fact of Mania if you haven't already figured that out yet.